Once again, thank you all for joining us for Jesus at the Center. And if you were able to catch Pastor Brian's sermon, thank you so much for an honest and transparent telling of how you're experiencing hope through healing.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I had something different planned, but then last night happened, and I was like, well, that seems to resonate more with the healing process, and sometimes not knowing, where it may end. It was a good ending for us. My wife is at home resting, but oftentimes you hope that prayer will be enough. But we had to go to the ER, and she got a bunch of medication and stuff like that with I don't know any medical terms, but she's doing well now.
Praise God. Sometimes we have a plan.
Yes.
Right? And when the plan goes awry, he uses the experience that we are experiencing at that time to speak to us in a way that can not only affect us, but affect those that we tell the story to.
Yeah, exactly. And you ask, you couldn't tell me this lesson any other way. Like, you couldn't just, visit to me in a dream at night, right? So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but you're right. We do learn a lot of valuable lessons when they hurt, It's kind of like when you're a kid, and the first way your parents kind of teach you something is by hitting you. It's because pain is the fastest way for you to learn that something not to do or something is in the way or something like that.
Ooh, what'd you say? Pain is the fastest thing?
Yeah, it's the fastest way to learn. I learned that from a comedy show.
Nice. Oh, Pastor, thank you for your message. Tonight with me on the panel, as you experienced last night with Pastor Mihai's sermon, he spoke about a living hope. And last night we wanted to showcase to you or present to you different individuals who in their professions gave a living hope. Tonight is no different. Tonight I have invited individuals who in their professions bring a hope for healing. So tonight we have Dr. Andrea Seymour. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we also have Mica Becker. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm going to start with you, Dr. Seymour. So you are a medical doctor. Can you please tell us what kind of medicine you practice?
So I am an anesthesiologist. I am the type of physician that when you go for surgery, I'm the one that's monitoring your heart, your blood pressure, oxygen levels, keeping you safe and asleep the whole time and comfortable when you wake up.
What was it that perhaps in your younger years that impressed you to go into this line of medicine?
So the decision to go into this particular line was something that happened much later, but my decision to go into medicine had a lot to do with close family members, specifically my mother and my sister who dealt with illnesses. My mother had an illness called polymyositis, and my sister was diagnosed when she was 15 with lupus.
Wow.
And so we had a lot of experience with going to the doctors. I went with my mother to the doctors, my sister dealing with medications, dealing with a lot of the issues that they had to go through. So I got to see what it was like from both sides, being in the hospitals or being in the offices with them, as well as how they dealt with it at home and how they dealt with everything that was happening. My sister being a teenager and everything you have to go through in the teenage years and having that on top of it. And then my mother, she was actually a registered nurse. She was an OR nurse and having to deal with going through everything she had to go through in order to, still be able to be there for us as a parent. So that was really the biggest thing that led me to wanting to go into medicine, because I wanted to provide that same comfort and that same assurance that people provided for my family when they needed it. I wanted to provide the same thing.
Wow. Okay. Mica, you told me a little bit of what you do in our conversation, but could you tell me the specific job that you have now and the types of people you are working with?
So I work for a nonprofit organization. It's called Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies. we have different programs within the agency. My particular program, we work with women who are either pregnant or have the baby, and the baby's under the age of 1. And we provide therapeutic services and case management services for those women who are experiencing depression and or anxiety. So we work with them for a period of about 6 months, providing therapy, helping them to overcome some of those barriers or challenges or traumas that's preventing them from moving forward or even bonding with the baby.
Yeah.
Right. What was it that led you into doing this kind of work?
To be honest, I know I've always wanted to be in this field. I just didn't know exactly what area I wanted to go into. I think what may have drawn me into this particular branch here, I didn't realize after I had my own baby, that I too experienced some form of postpartum depression. So it took me a while to overcome that, but now that I'm here working with these women, I realize that I also experienced this so many years ago.
Awesome.
Andrea, when you are working with your patients, has there been a particular experience that has impacted you in a way that underlines, this is why I do what I do?
Wow, there's so many, I have to admit. So I would say 2 parts. I also, at least in the past, had done work with pain management. So I worked at an outpatient office. And I won't say that there was, and then sometimes in the hospitals as well. So dealing with patients who come into the hospital for various and assorted reasons and asked to help with managing their pain. I'm not sure if it's just one in particular, but there's a certain subset of patients that really kind of touch me, and I would say it's the cancer patients. Especially, I can think of one in particular. She was young, she was only in her 40s, and she had end-stage breast cancer, came into the hospital with complications, and she knew that, her situation was something that was terminal, barring divine intervention, but what she just needed was she wanted to go home just one more time because she had a 12-year-old and a husband, and she wanted to be with them as well as her family. And our goal was to help everyone else the team, whether it was me for pain and the other doctors, the surgeons who were dealing with it, were trying to help her accomplish that goal. And she didn't. It was something that you said about being in the story where Jesus asked the gentleman what he wanted. It wasn't obvious what she wanted at first. When she first came in, it was about all her symptoms that she was having, and everyone's focused on that. But it wasn't until sitting down and talking to her that I actually found out. It was one evening talking with her and her husband that that's really what she wanted. That's really what she needed.
Wow.
And once I communicated that to the rest of the team, that look, this is really, yes, we're doing all of this, but this is really what she wants. It kind of changed how we dealt with her, and it kind of changed how we approached the situation, so that now it wasn't just like, okay, let's just get you kind of comfortable and then that's it. It's like, yeah, let's get you home. Let's get you to what you want to happen. That was just an example of it, just underlined to me that providing that compassion and that comfort and listening to patients, really listening to them, is something that many people have said that I'm good at, and that's where I really saw that that's where God was using me. And he's used me many times to just really listen to people.
So instead of just doing what your training has trained you to do, you're now listening with not only your ears, but you're listening with your heart. So it doesn't mean that this patient's going to go home. She knows that she's not, it doesn't mean that she's going to live. She knows that she's going to die, but this is what you want. So you're making it as comfortable as possible for her to do so.
Exactly.
Doesn't that hurt sometimes?
Yes. because you realize, just like what you said, that there's a limit to what you can do with all of the knowledge and all of the advances in medicine that we have. There's still a limit. There's a limit to what we can do, and there is that hope and that peace that we are not able, in just, giving someone medicines or giving someone tests, we're not able to give it in that. That you have to find other ways to give it.
Mica, what about you? In your line of work, has there been a specific incident, episode that really spoke to you, that underlined that, yes, this is what you are supposed to be doing?
There's been many. I can't think of one, but as you were, again, when you brought up asking questions, I kept shaking my head. In our first session, I always ask my clients, what do you hope to gain from this experience? What are your expectations? I can sit here and think of 10 goals, 100 goals for you, but what is it that you want to accomplish? Right. What is it that you want to change? How do you see this journey for you? And listening to exactly what they're saying and take into account, I encourage my clients to establish mission statements and personal mission statements. And I ask them to answer, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose in life? Wow. And when they are able to answer these questions, they're able to come up with these beautiful mission statements. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but that's okay. And then we can go ahead and go into our goals, right? The stages of change. But when a client's able to come back to me after 3 or 6 months of working together, and they're able to repeat some of the things that I've said, and I don't remember when I said it. They're like, you remember, you said it. So I'm like, okay, if you said I said it, sure, I said it. And they're able to build their self-esteem, build their confidence, stand up for themselves and say, I can do this, or go back to school, right? We work with many women who've been defeated, shattered, abused, experienced all types of traumas. And towards the end, they can come back and say, I want to live. I want to continue. That's, for me, that speaks
awesome.
volume.
Yeah.
What is your ratio of success stories where after you've helped a woman through, the specific transition, how many success stories come back maybe 6 months, a year later and say, hey, because of what you did for me, this is what I'm doing with my life now?
I'm sure our program manager keeps track of that, but we do follow up with our clients a month and after our sessions end, and that gives us a sense of how they're doing after. And I do have clients who reach out to me who send me pictures of them and their babies, and like, this is where I am now, I've graduated. So I don't have a specific number, but it's quite a few.
Fantastic, thank you. Pastor Brian, you mentioned feeling helpless, that even the simplest things that you should know as a husband, it kind of just all goes out the window when you are dealing with your loved one, your family member. Yeah. And I know that as pastors, for me too, for me too, it's the hospital has always been a difficult place for me because in my life, I've seen so many ambulances come to my house, whether it's my grandparents or my parents, my husband. And so every time I hear an ambulance fly by, even if I'm not in the same state or anything, I always get a trigger reaction. Wow. Right? Okay. And so now as pastors, we're looked to as comforters, right? And when we go and we're expected to give hope, and we do, and it's easy for us to give hope, and everything went to our members. But then when it's us, and you're feeling that helplessness, what do you do to counter that helplessness when you know a living God, when you've been preaching a living and restorative God? How then do you reach deep and cling on to the same hope that you've preached?
You write a sermon for Plantation Church. No, I think that in that helplessness there is I think God is so merciful, because even like, for instance, in your career line where you know what might happen to this patient, you still see the mercy of God in saying that He saves you from that final thing. Like, the decision of her living or dying is not on you. The decision of these women living on in their lives or doing better is not on you. That we can count on someone who, in this case God, right, of an external source that is bigger and more powerful and knows more than we know, more than we will ever know. And having someone like that, believing in Him, having a relationship with Him, allows you for, in those moments, that whatever happens, I don't believe that it's God's will for bad things to happen to people. I think those are just consequences of our circumstance. But I do believe that He loves and cares. And so when I saw my wife going through the pain that she was going through, and I mentioned that it was the third one that she's had in her lifetime, I was there for two of them. The first one, I was surrounded by family, and so the weight of it didn't really fall or stop with me. So it was easier in that sense than this time, where, it was just me, right? And we have a dog, and we had to. It was just weird. He's delicate, so we put a cone on him, but I couldn't find the cone. I couldn't find anything. I just left there. We have protocols, right? Because we gotta be with a dog. But when we got to the hospital, I packed random stuff. Like, I just grabbed stuff, and I remember because I grabbed my laptop charger, but not my laptop. I don't know why, and yes, everything just goes out. But to answer your question, sorry, I'm rambling here. To answer your question, in that moment, what helps me cling on to God is, I hate to say it, but recounting the past, And I hate to say it because that's typically the first thing used against young people for trying new things.
Yes.
And so I can recount the past, and there's not a single moment where He's left me. Even when the moments where He was quiet, we had Vespers a few weeks ago. We had Manny Arteaga talking about the whisper of God, and He whispers because He's close, right? And I thought that was it's so interesting that God is so near to me. Even though I can't hear Him in that present moment, God is so near to me. And to be able to just look back and see, man, I'm here now because of God. I know that my wife is here now because of God. Every breath that she takes, being close to her, to be able to just hear her breathing, though she's going through the pain, every time that she would yawn, I would be like, God, you're here. God, you're here. God, you're here. And it's because of my belief of Genesis chapter 1 and 2. So I think that's kind of like the way that I kind of wrestle those things out. Because, if we're being honest, right? We're pastors. I don't know if this happens to you, Jen, but sometimes I'm walking my dog at night, and I'm like, is all this, is this real? Or, am I, and I'm like, no, God, you're here. It's real. That
Yes.
The faith just comes alive.
Yes.
And that's what's beautiful about just everything. John chapter 1, the Word being Jesus, is because the Word is always going to be alive. And this isn't alive because some dude wrote it because of the Holy Spirit. It's alive because Jesus embodied it.
That's right.
So I don't know.
No, you're right on.
Did I
you're
answer
right on
the
track,
question?
Pastor.
I don't
Yes,
know.
you did.
Yeah.
You did. We have a question that came in from online, and it reads, I am a person that has to have control over situations, or I feel weak and powerless. What are some Bible verses that can help me remember and tell me to let go and trust God with a complete blind faith?
That's tricky because I don't think faith is blind. I know we preach that often, but I don't think that God requires us to walk completely blind. That is just something I feel we made up. I think any story in the Bible that you read, you see that God calls an underdog, God calls people that are just unable to do whatever the task may be. We are unable to live up to the standards of godliness. It's impossible. And so just pick up the Bible, and if you read anything, you'll see that the person that wrote it, the true feelings behind that were, how little am I, how great is God, and in my weakness, he is made strong. And not that God is strong because you're weak, is that my weakness allows him to see how strong God is.
Yes. So you're saying that we shouldn't just proof text, that there isn't just one scripture that says, boom, right there, that's the one that's
But
going to encourage me to have faith.
That's the gospel, you know.
That's the gospel,
the
all
entirety
the
of
stories.
Scripture, the entirety of what's going to happen is because we are so little and bad that God came to this earth to save us, to rescue us from our depravity, you know. And so I think like when we really search the Scriptures, when we know ourselves, and we start from a low point, we're able to see the goodness of Jesus, the goodness of Christ. I think all of the Bible, just everything is cemented on the fact that God is great and good, and builds everything up from there.
I have some questions from the audience for our two panelists. And it doesn't even have to have a spiritual backing, but the question is, why do we need healing? And how do I pray to get healing?
Why do we need healing? I think that the healing, so I'll say from what I see with patients, when they come in for, let's say, a surgery, or they come in for whatever the reason is, they have whatever the medical issue is, and they're looking for resolution to that issue, it's because it's connected to so many other things in their life. Their health and that healing is connected to maybe them being able to go to work, maybe them being able to take care of their kids or their grandkids. And so that healing and restoration allows them to continue to do the things that, you know, God has given them to do, whether it's their work, whether it's their kids, whatever that is, and to continue to progress towards those things. And that's why I think that healing is necessary. It's also something that speaks, I think, to other generations as well. So it's not something that is just for that person, but their children can see, their grandchildren can see, and they can see how God intervenes for them, and they can see how that healing was necessary for them to continue to provide for them. So it empowers even the next generation to look to faith, to look to God, to look for that healing and restoration. I don't know if that answered the question.
No, that does. Mica, do you have an opinion on that?
I do have clients that, bring a spiritual aspect into our sessions, and I'm very open to that. I don't, personally push it, but I do have clients who blame God for everything that has happened to them. So we talk about that, we process that. Then we talk about forgiveness. What is the importance of forgiveness so that we can try to take some steps to move forward, right? And that can take a few sessions, going through the steps of forgiveness. And sometimes we find ourselves going back to the beginning, questioning why we want to forgive. So I usually start there. What is it that's holding us back? What is it that's preventing you from taking that next step forward?
So you're also saying that it's an internal war. It's not just physical ailment. It's an internal war that can keep them from becoming better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Pastor Brian, how do we truly experience healing in the face of doubt?
In the face of doubt?
Yes.
Oh, that's an easy one. So I think when you read the last couple of chapters of Mark, you get to see something crazy happening. So these disciples, right, they've been following Jesus this whole time. They know about Jesus. They're like, yeah, you're going to die, you're going to resurrect, you're the Messiah. Okay, cool. They're listening to all this stuff. But then he dies, right? And before he resurrects, a number of things happen. Peter and some of them go back to fishing, others go back to doing whatever the heck they were doing. And then towards the end of at least Mark, you see that Jesus obviously resurrects. And he speaks to several people to go and tell the disciples, hey, I'm alive. Go tell them that I'm alive. And you'll see in those last couple of chapters that every time that the disciples hear someone come in and say, oh yeah, that he's alive, it says, but they didn't believe. And then Jesus himself shows up in the midst of them. And then his following words to them are, go out and preach the gospel to a room of unbelievers. Because none of them believed that he had risen again, even though he had told them, and then several others after the fact had told him. And so I think that oftentimes we wrestle with these things, but God isn't expecting us to have this perfect faith that we don't question things. Our nature is to question things, is to ask. And I think everything that he's ever created will always ask questions of him because he's the only one that knows it all.
That's right.
And so as we go through our faith, hey, we are doubtful people. I mean, we just talked about it. I asked you, I'm like, I'm walking my dog and I doubt. And it's not because there's a lack of relationship there. It's just moments of doubt don't define you. At the end of the day, I think the one thing that we need to hold fast is the fact that Jesus came to take upon himself my sins and offer salvation, and he empowers me to accept that gift. And aside from that, then I can live my life according to the grace extended to me, or however I choose. There isn't really another answer for me. I think doubt is not necessarily bad.
We often make fun of doubting Thomas, but I think Thomas had it right when he said, "Let me."
Yeah.
He wants to touch him. He needed to touch the scars and touch everything to make sure that he had truly risen.
Exactly. And I think John, the Gospel of John and Revelation speak to that, because he's talking to a generation that never met Jesus, these Christians. And so you'll see that all the miracles in the Gospel of John, Jesus doesn't touch anybody. It's just through words, because his words are still alive today. It's just through those things. And so we don't, it's perfect to doubt. It's part of life. It's fine. Like, why do you look for, you always look for second opinions, right? When you go to a doctor and things like that, because you just want to make sure.
You want to make sure. That's right.
But faith is always there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Any one of you can answer this. It's an important question for anyone contemplating. How do you offer hope to a young person thinking of suicide?
Unfortunately, I do get that quite often.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we do get these cases quite often where we have a young person, older person, contemplating ending their lives for whatever reason. I'm thinking of one in particular that I had last year, went through so much trauma and difficulties and challenge in life, and, pregnant, and felt abandoned. Yeah. No one, loved her, and, she wasn't, her faith was slowly going away, questioning her reality and all of that. In our profession, the first thing I have to do is create a safety plan, right? What are some resources that we can put in place in the event that you want to harm yourself? What are some people we can call? What are some coping mechanisms? And the list goes on and on. I'm on that list, and my number is there. If you need to reach me, I'm available for that. crisis intervention. But I have to say, towards the 6 months of working with this particular individual, I noticed the thoughts kept going down because she started to believe that she is loved. She started to believe that she can live for this baby. So she found her reason to live, and that was her baby.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy. It was very challenging. But yeah, it's just helping them to build on the strength that they have, helping them to challenge some of those negative thoughts that constantly comes and goes, and not sit in those negative thoughts, not believing that what that person said is actually true. So it's not something that can happen overnight. It's a series of interventions that we do put in place to help anyone who's having thoughts of harming themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. One last question for all of you. One-liner. How do you encourage others to have a living hope?
I will say, so there was one of the offices that I worked in, we had something that we had posted in the area where you come in and check in so that all of the patients could see it. And we were looking for artwork online because we were trying to decorate the office. But then we saw something in particular, but I saw there was a quote on one of these, and that stuck with me, and I wanted to have that up in the office. And it said, "Pain is real, but so is hope." And so that's what I usually discuss and tell patients, whether it's physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain, acknowledge that their pain is real, but so is hope.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Mica, how do you encourage others to have a living hope?
Through faith. I'm a Christian. I live by that, and whether it's with my clients or personally, I just encourage everyone, just rely on the faith that you have, right? And try not to control the situation, right? Focus on what you can do right now, the little steps that you can take right now, but not so much of what, you cannot control. But just the words encouraging, just being faithful. For me, it's, especially personally, I just encourage people around me, just rely on that faith that you have.
Pastor Brian, how do you encourage others to have a living hope?
So I'm not getting super biblical. I think that consistency. And the reason I say that is because if, like, for instance, you have a young person who is contemplating suicide, whatever the motives may be, and if they have a plan put into action, or if they failed before, consistency works in a way that you constantly address them, that they feel present in the room, they feel valued. And so I think that consistency is so important throughout what we do as Christians, because it's something that someone can expect and look forward to, because they know that you're always either going to do that thing or say that thing or be that thing that they can look for. At least in our context, we love to do religion one day out of the week. In our case, it's Saturday, right? And so each Saturday to be able to be consistent about them being valued and honored and feel that support, so that even though their week may not be good and they may have these intrusive thoughts, they can look forward to, okay, no, but on Saturday, I'm going to have this experience. And so being consistent, I think, is a way to give people hope, because something is stable around them.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Seymour. Thank you, Mica. Thank you, Pastor Brian, for an excellent panel discussion. Please stay tuned. We will be closing with Lanaya, who will be giving us our closing song. Thank you, all of you.